The big political moments of 2023. What will 2024 bring? This is Politics Live. Joining me, Conservative MP Matt Warman, Labour MP John McDonnell, entrepreneur and founder of the Bank of Dave, Dave Fishwick, and political strategist Joe Tanner. On today's programme.
The uncomfortable truth is that we have not built more because in many parts of the country there is a resistance to new development.
Michael Gove takes aim at councils as the government misses its house building targets.
Well, it's a bit rich for the Conservatives after 13 years in government to finally realise that they need to take action on building houses in this country.
This is not about forcing schools to tell parents. This is about making sure that parents know what is happening with their children.
Parents should be informed if pupils want to socially transition to a different gender.
5 promises. We will halve inflation, grow the economy, reduce debt, cut waiting lists and stop the boats.
Promises, promises. How many have politicians actually kept? And was this the biggest political shock of 2023?
I'm a bit tired, but I don't think I've had a funny turn. But let me just tell you what's just happened. David Cameron has just walked up the street and gone into 10 Downing Street.
What surprises await in 2024? And will Henry Zeffman ever get to go to sleep? But what surprises await us in the next 45 minutes? Let's see. Right, before we start thinking about 2024, let's look back at 2023. I'm going to ask everyone in the programme, what do they think the most consequential political event of the last 12 months has been? Matt, you can go first.
Well, I think it obviously has to be what's gone on in Israel, doesn't it? That has sent shockwaves around the world, and it will continue to do so for years, if not decades. So I think it is very clearly that, and we're still wrestling with it.
John?
Agree. I just can't. Every day, I cannot get out of my mind the issue around the hostages and what we see on our television with regard to Gaza and the number of children that have been killed. It is the most consequential event, both in terms of humanity, but also the consequences for the region and for all of us globally. So I'm afraid it is that, and I just hope that 24 is going to be about peace.
Do you think it's dislodged the Ukraine conflict from the public's mind?
It has, and we shouldn't let that happen, but it's inevitable it has. We'll return to Ukraine soon, I'm afraid, because it looks as though it's hotting up on the edges there in terms of the boundaries. But, you know, literally, there is not a day when I don't see something on the television that is so distressing, I cannot get it out of my mind. And I think that's the same with the general population as well. I don't know what yours are like, but I've had thousands of emails from constituents, all of them saying the same thing. We want a ceasefire. We want the release of hostages. It's appalling what Hamas did. But what we're seeing now, I think many are saying these are war crimes. We've got to end it.
Matt, is that reflected when you, I hate to say that cliche of on the doorstep, but when you talk to voters, is that the number one thing that they talk about that happened to them this year?
No, is the short answer, and I think it does come up a lot more than you might think. Mine is a constituency with a small Muslim population, a very small, almost non-existent Jewish population in terms of residents. But that's not the lens to see it through. It's everyone that sees this, and I think we get distracted in some ways by some of the semantics around it. For me, it's very clear that Israel does have a right to defend itself, that these were extraordinary acts of terrorism, all that, but what comes up on the doorstep around this is the humanitarian situation, and I think everyone wants to see massive progress. But to answer your question, the number one issue does remain the cost of living. It remains all of the big ticket economy stuff, and I think if I had to choose a domestic issue to be the most consequential, then the fact is that inflation is half what it was, that the government has started trying to cut taxes. That is
talking
no,
points.
Exactly. But it is.
People are struggling.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm not making a particular point. On the people are struggling, and that's it. That's struggling on everything, whether it's mortgage, rents, food prices, that sort of thing. People are just struggling, so that comes up. Definitely.
We will come on to the inflation target in a minute. But Dave, what would you say was I'm going to clarify it, the biggest political event that happened in the UK this year? And you can't say your film coming out on Netflix.
I think that's pretty big.
Did it affect British politics?
It will do. I think it will.
I think one of the biggest things, I mean, let's just clarify that. This is the political and economic, not about world peace. Obviously, world peace is the most important thing in the world, and the war's going on. But let's just take a look back at 2023. Banks were going bankrupt again. We've had 3 massive banks go bankrupt again. You know, billions have been lost again. And yet we're uncapping bankers' bonuses. How does that work? So on one side, I'm getting letters from schools saying, Dave, you know, we really, really need some money for some food because children are coming to school hungry in the morning because of the cost of living crisis. And on the other side, we've got uncapping of bankers' bonuses, and yet banks are going bust again. You know,
rewards for failure, you would say.
Seems to be a bonkers 2023.
Okay.
You know, the cost of living crisis is massive. Mortgages are going up. People are struggling. I'm getting letters from people at the Bank of Dave saying, Dave, can I have a loan for formula, for baby milk? You know, I've never seen that before. You know, 2023 has been a tough year for a lot of people.
Do you know, one of those schools that have been writing to Dave, I think, is where my daughter teaches in Burnley. The teachers have been distributing food to the families. That's how bad it is at the moment.
Joe?
Well, I mean, taking into account all the points that have already been said, I think one of the other big issues is actually Keir Starmer's speech at party conference. We had yet another leader's speech interrupted by somebody managing to get onto the stage. And I think Keir handled that extremely well. But the thing that concerns me is what happens for that election next year when we've got these huge tensions globally, and we've seen big tensions in the UK from those tensions that are going on globally. And we've lost 2 MPs in the UK, and we still haven't managed to work out how to keep people safe. And that is a big issue for our democracy. Our democracy, with big election next year, seismic change possibly happening, we can't have people afraid to go out and campaign. And I do think that still needs to be looked at.
Yeah, it was interesting because I was in the audience when that happened, and there was a protester who wanted changes to the democratic system and how the Commons works, threw some glitter on Keir Starmer. And my first reaction was, this is going to change speech-making for all politicians forever. But actually, because Keir Starmer handled it quite well, laughed it off, and he incorporated it into his speech, actually, that's not where it went. That's not where the conversation went.
It potentially helped him. I think he relaxed massively because you've got that moment of panic and then you realise it's not what you think it could be. And I think that speech was very, very well delivered, and it actually probably displaced quite a considerable amount of nerves.
Do you know what? Let's talk about another speech which Rishi Sunak, the Prime Minister, gave in January this year, where he set out his 5 pledges. 3 of them were to do with the economy, 1 was to do with migration, and 1 was to do with the health service. But how is he doing? Nick Eardley from BBC Verify has been spreadsheeting them up. Nick.
I've got them on the screens here to tell you as well, Adam. The Prime Minister made a big pledge saying, I will deliver what I promise. But as things stand, it's actually looking pretty tricky. Let's look firstly at the big pledge on inflation. As you can see, at the start of the year, it's very high. It's over 10%. It's come right down to 4.6% in October. So it's worth pointing out this is the job of the Bank of England, not the government. But it looks like this one will be achieved. So it's getting the BBC Verify tick. The second big economic challenge was on economic growth. And as you can see here, it's quite up and down. The figures are actually quite erratic over the course of the year. But if you look at October here, it's flat. So on this one, it's in the balance. It's hard to tell if Rishi Sunak is going to meet this pledge. So we're giving it a question mark. Finally, debt. The pledge was to bring down debt when compared with the size of the economy. As you can see, it's actually gone up a bit since Rishi Sunak made that pledge. Now, he's been telling Cabinet this morning that he's confident it will fall over time. The forecasters say that's likely to happen, even if it would involve some unpopular spending cuts. But at the moment, with those figures, we can't just be sure. So again, that one's getting a question mark. So far, he's achieved 1, 2 are in the balance. It all goes downhill for the government from here, though, because let's look at NHS waiting lists first. The pledge was bring them down. You can see what's happened here. Back at the start of the year, they were at 7.2 million, very high. They've gone up even more, and they're now over 7.7 million. Now, the government blames that on strikes in England. They point out that some of the longer waits have been cut, but for ministers to achieve their targets on that, they've got a long way to go. So we're going to say that one not met. And finally, stop the small boats. This was 2022, a record high. The numbers have come down by about a third, but you can see for 2023 there, they're still high. They're still 30,000. So that's not really fulfilling that pledge to stop the boats. Of course, the plan to send some people to Rwanda has been blocked by the courts. Returns numbers are still pretty low. So on this one, we're saying not achieved at the moment either. So to sum up, Rishi Sunak's 2023 report card, 1 tick, 2 question marks, 2 crosses. Remember that the PM didn't say all of this would be completed by the end of the year, but as 2023 draws to a close, as he appears before the liaison committee later, there's a lot to do if he's going to turn that into 5 ticks.
Nick and graphics department, thank you very much. So, Matt, how are you going to grow the economy, cut the NHS waiting list and stop the boats in the next 12 days? That's how long we've got.
So I think one of the questions when these 5 pledges were announced was, when are you doing it? Like, where's the timetable?
This year,
and I think very clearly what also matters is where are we come the next election, right? Is that it is obvious that some of those...
Oh, so these were pledges for sort of 18 months, 2 years,
I'm not pretending that I'm not trying to move the calendar year kind of thing, but I think in the mind of the public, in my own mind, these are the right things to be aiming at. There is clearly a lot of work to do. And as Nick demonstrates, like it has to be a work in progress, and no one is saying that that is a good enough report card, right? But it is a reason to keep doing what we're doing. And there is some, as Nick also said, there is some genuine evidence around the NHS waiting list. For instance,
they're going up.
The one line doesn't tell you the whole story, right? Is that the very longest waiting times that people that have been in those really difficult positions, we've made huge progress there. We are seeing GPs seeing more and more people. The things that are driving waiting lists up are also more nuanced. So I think it's the danger of the political slogans with which we all have to live is that sometimes you need to unpack them to get to how people really feel in real life.
Joe, do you think these pledges are actually a bit of an albatross around the neck of Tory MPs? Because isn't the first rule of politics pledge something that you know you can deliver, not something that's out of your control?
Absolutely, and also something you can remember. I mean, one of the challenges is the longer these lists are and the more complicated, to Matt's point, you can actually forget what they are. When talking to one of the producers before the show, we couldn't remember all of them, and it sort of said, well, hang on, we're in this business and we can't remember what they all are. So that tells you something. But, you know, politicians love a list. There's, you know, we remember the 97 pledge card, and I'm sure John's still got one probably somewhere in the drawer at home, but, you know...
Even though it's Blairite.
Can you remember the pledges?
Can you remember them? You know, that's the thing.
Virtually the same now, aren't they? It was about employment, NHS and education, but education was the big one, if you remember.
The priorities don't necessarily change. It's just the metrics, that how big the problem is probably where we are now, that the problems are significantly bigger. Keir Starmer's probably looking at that list thinking, kind of hope Rishi does make some inroads towards it, because I've got a bigger problem to solve if I do come in next year.
Yeah.
So, you know, they definitely are a challenge.
Dave, if Rishi Sunak had phoned you up before he was doing that speech and said, Dave, I want 5 priorities for the country, 5 targets I could aim for, what 5 things would you have advised him to go for?
Well, I think...
Might have been these ones. You might have stuck with these ones.
Let's be honest. I mean, inflation has halved. But what that's done, wages and the bands for wages haven't kept up with that. So what's happened is people have been fiscally dragged into tax. So there's more people paying tax now than there was before, with the inflation going up. But I mean, I made a couple of notes earlier, and I think it's important. So, growing the economy. If somebody rung me up and said, I run 6 businesses, so I own 6 businesses here and in America. And I think these are the things: investment, 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 more education, more apprenticeship.
Is that investment 3 things?
Yeah,
or one
no.
thing? It's investment, comma. It's
investment,
not 1, 2, 3.
investment, comma,
okay,
investment
so
with a big
one.
exclamation mark. More apprenticeships, more education, make money available to businesses, lower the interest rates, let people get on the property ladder, increase real wages above, and inflation, increased spending. But spend on infrastructure, spend on things that are going to produce something. That is so important. But the burden of tax needs to lie on those with the broadest shoulders. We need a windfall tax on the energy companies and the big banks to be able to put the money in so real people all over the UK can benefit it. Banks need to remember what they were there in the first place, to service the public.
When are you standing, Dave?
Yeah,
I think we'll all be joining.
The thing is, I've no qualifications. That's the problem. I was straight onto a building site at 16, and then I've
I
worked
don't think
ever
you need a
since.
qualification to be an MP.
That doesn't mean anything at all.
That's exactly the qualification we need.
Which party would you stand for if you did?
Well, I just
Set up your
stick
own,
for the
probably,
people.
don't
I
you?
mean, I'm not going to. I'm very bipartisan. I just want a fairer system. We need to make sure that nobody gets left behind. There needs to be a net for people to fall on, to bounce back up, so they can contribute to society.
Matt, respond to some of that, because some of the things that Dave was talking about there, if you translated them into priorities, they maybe feel a little bit more tangible in real world. And actually, Rishi Sunak's priorities are quite wonkish, because people don't feel the national debt in their life. OK, it's an important aspect of public life and the state of the nation, but you don't feel the national debt when you come home from work at night.
No, but it's having the right economic policies is what allows you to cut taxes, right? Is that trying to explain to people what some of this stuff means in practice is hard. And I remember I think it was 2015, a Conservative poster with a baby that had just been born and that said this baby already owes £28,000, like trying to make sure.
How much is it now?
That people, but people understand.
Probably double that now.
But of course, and then we'd be into an argument of, well, you have to adjust for inflation and like talking about this stuff in tangible human terms is really hard. It's why we're building a new A&E in my constituency, for instance. I'm much keener to talk about it will mean you will get seen locally within a matter of hours than I am to say we're spending 40 million quid on doing it. I think putting it in human terms is an essential for good political communication.
Yeah, I think I like that. I think targeted tax cuts as well. So they're targeted to people who benefit the most, not them at the top of the tree.
Right, John, Keir Starmer's got 5 missions. Don't look at this bit of paper.
All right.
What are Keir Starmer's 5 missions?
Okay, can I just say on Rishi Sunak? So
Buy yourself some thinking time.
All I can say is I was a civil servant in local government before I got elected for 20 years. And I just want to use that yes minister phrase. When Sunak came up with those pledges, I thought, I was really courageous. Do you know that yes minister phrase when you know you're going to come a cropper eventually? I knew you were going to ask me this.
Yeah.
It was obvious, so I thought, how am I?
Oh, thanks.
I can never.
He's written them on his
No,
hand.
when you said we're going to look at Sunak, when I was told we were going to look at Sunak, it was obvious we were going to think. So I thought, how am I going to remember this? I can never remember this. So I did a sort of mnemonic, right?
Okay.
So it's EGON. So it's environment. Energy.
Energy, Great British Energy.
It's growth, and it's the highest in the G7, I think
Yes.
he said, which I think is ambitious as well, to be honest.
Courageous to take
Yeah.
that.
And then it's opportunities for all.
Yep.
Yeah. And then it's NHS.
Yeah, back on its feet.
Back on its feet, and there's Safer Streets. That's the one
Take
that
back
actually
our
emerged from his
streets.
speech at conference, if I remember. Safer Streets, yeah.
Well done.
Well,
5 out of 5.
Look, it was obvious you were going to ask that.
Yeah, exactly. You did have like
I'll
fair
most probably
warning.
instantly forget them as soon as I come off the programme. I apologise to Keir for that.
Are they barnstorming on the doorstep, those 5 missions?
There's some in terms of, look, when we campaign, you know what it's like. What people are interested in at the moment is cost of living. So if you put it in a broad mission term, of course not. But take one of Dave's points. If you say the banks have made £30 billion worth of profits in the first 6 months of this year, why don't we tax them? People remember that.
That's not on Keir Starmer's
it's
list,
not.
though,
That's
is it?
why
Do you
I
think there should be a 6th mission?
Well, I think there's a whole range of issues we've got to talk about in concrete terms. In NHS, it is about investment and making sure we deliver the hospitals that we've been promised, that sort of thing. So Matt's right, you translate it to the local level. But again, I think people are pretty sceptical at the moment because they know how tough things are. And my issue with Keir and these missions is we need now to translate those into concrete policies that people believe and understand, and they have to be radical, because the point that Joe made, the inheritance of this Labour government is going to be the most toxic of any government in our history in the last 70 years, I think.
Let's look at the poll of polls from the Politico website. So this is how the trend lines for Labour and the Conservatives have gone over the last year. Basically, it's not changed. So, Matt, what does that tell us? Does that tell us that the pledges aren't landing, or that no one's listening, or nothing makes a difference? What's your theory about why nothing has changed for a whole year?
I think when I talk to people on the doorstep, then that sort of question of if there was an election tomorrow, how would you vote, which is what those polls are based on, they know there isn't going to be one. is that the simple reality of politics at the moment is people are focused, I think, on the day-to-day. They are focused on what does my mortgage look like, what does the rent look like.
Oh, so that gap could narrow quite significantly.
So I think that there is a lot of scope for the Prime Minister to make some real improvement. I think the more Labour come under scrutiny, there's going to be a lot of scope for them to go down a lot, because people do want to see concrete plans of what the country will look like under any government, and that is not there yet, and I worry about what that will look like. But the answer to are those polling numbers good enough? No, of course they're not, and they would make any government feel uncomfortable. They make me feel uncomfortable, but I would say, I guess.
Are you putting it politely by saying uncomfortable?
No, I'm not, and I say that because we are a year or so away. But I think what I want to do is put the Labour Party under some scrutiny. I'm happy to defend an awful lot of the record, but I think we do have to say, look, you're going to face a choice, and I really don't think that a Keir Starmer government is going to be able to deliver half of what people hope it will, or even what Keir Starmer says it will himself.
Joe, is Matt putting a brave face on it there, or is he being maybe a bit naive, or...?
I mean, I think there's some truth in what Matt's saying, in that 2024 has been heralded as the year for the election. We all got a little bit excited, obviously, with the Rwanda vote and what was going to happen next. But we know that it is going to happen at some point during that year. And let's face it, neither side has really shown everything yet. You know, Labour have done a very good job of rowing behind Rachel and making sure that as Shadow Chancellor, they don't commit to anything. They don't talk about, you know, any potential spending pledges that are going to sort of destabilise the idea of Labour being fiscally responsible. But at the same time, the Tories have got this challenge of having to deal with the here and now, and actually looking at what they would do in a future government when they haven't managed to do it in the time that they've been in is quite a difficult conversation to be having with themselves and with the public. So I feel like we're in a bit of a holding pattern. I think people are just kind of going, just try and make my day-to-day a little bit better. And actually, you know, I might begrudgingly put a vote against someone's name. I mean, I actually worry that next year a lot of people are not going to vote. I think people are very sick of politics. No disrespect to the politicians here. I think are very fine gentlemen in their own rights. But
oh, it's Christmas, you can tell.
And I work in this industry. But let's face it, you know, for every scandal, for every problem, for every time there is a challenge, it's a plague on everyone's houses. Everyone's sick of it. Everyone thinks that politics doesn't matter to them. We have generations getting turned off. To Dave's point about mortgage rates, people can't get on the housing ladder. They see failure after failure. So the challenge is actually, how do we... That isn't... I don't really mind what it does. I just hope the people participating grows rather than narrows over time.
It's Harold Wilson, I keep quoting this. Harold Wilson, in his book, Governance of Britain, he said elections, this is his iron law of elections, it's not the people who vote that decide elections, it's the ones who decide not to vote, who stay at home. And they stay at home for two reasons. One is either they can't see the difference between the two parties, or they think it's a foregone conclusion. That's the fear that some of us have at the moment. I think
Which one is it at the moment then, do you reckon?
I think it's a combination of the two. At the moment, people are thinking, oh, the Tories are going to get absolutely massacred on these polls and all the rest of it. And there is an issue about, for Labour, being absolutely clear about what you're going to do in government and practically and pragmatically how you're going to do it. And that we need a lot more work to do. And my view is it takes a long while to land a new policy. You know, during the 2019 election, you know, because it was Brexit, I was throwing out policy after policy. And it lacked credibility because you need about 12 months to say this is what we're going to do.
Look what happened to Theresa May with social care when that came out as the election's already...
But John, doesn't...
You need to say what you're going to do, rebut the criticism, then bed it in over a period of time. And we're running out of time. So the issue for me will be around turnout, whether we can mobilise voters. They will narrow those polls. They have this weekend anyway. And I think Labour has never accepted any complacency. It's about now, let's drive through and really explain what we're going to do in government.
But don't these polls show that you and Jeremy Corbyn, your plan of just being super bold, nationalise broadband, bold, well, actually was wrong, and actually being Mr Modest like Keir Starmer is
I think there's an argument there. Of course there is. But at the same time, I think what happened with us in 2019, because we nearly got there in 2017, in 2019, it was all Brexit. The election came 2 years early, so no one wanted to talk about any other policy apart from Brexit. So when I was throwing out policies, individually they were supported, but when they put them all together, we hadn't had time to demonstrate how they could work as a programme. That's the reason for it, really. But now there's a real opportunity. The Tories actually, I don't want to be too critical, but the situation is the Tories have fallen apart as a government. You know, had so many ministers in different jobs, so many prime ministers. I think there's a natural cycle in these things where the electorate think we need a change. But the issue for me is I think we will win the election. It's about what sort of majority we get. The issue for us is we need the support when we're in government. Otherwise, I don't want to be a one-term government and then the Tories get back in again.
OK, one Conservative minister who's hung around the whole time is Michael Gove, the Levelling Up and Housing Secretary. He's been doing a speech about housing in London this morning. Let's have a little listen to his argument.
Local authorities have the comfort of knowing that they need not redraw the green belt or sacrifice protected landscapes to meet housing numbers. But let me be clear. While this is a more robust assertion of previous principles and protections, it is not a route to the evasion of responsibilities. Local authorities must provide rigorous evidence justifying their departure from assessed housing need. They must do everything to identify other land suitable for development, and while the Planning Inspectorate will respect well-made cases, it will not accept undershooting that is not firmly rooted in environmental or other safeguards. This is about sensitive adjustment in meeting targets, not their abandonment.
Right, what's he actually on about? We will ask Matt in a second to clarify, because I'm going to be honest, I'm still a bit confused about what's actually been announced today. But Dave, before we do that, just explain, why is house building and house owning and the housing market just so crucial to so many people's lives in this country? What's the easy way of saying, because this debate about targets and spatial plans can all get a bit like esoteric.
Absolutely. Look, removing targets will mean these things. Councils will build less homes, house builders will collapse, house prices will go up and young people will struggle getting on the housing ladder. I can cure it. I think some of it, I've had an idea.
OK, here we go.
Now, I have a friend in Burnley who's done a wonderful job of taking some of the old buildings and the empty shops all over Burnley, some of the big banking buildings that shut down, made them into flats and homes for people to live in. And it's creating a hub back in the community. And there's thousands and thousands of shops all over the UK that's empty. Now, some people don't want you to build a house in a green field. I get that. Although we do need to build homes for people. People need somewhere to live.
What was it about the system or any changes to the system in recent years that meant your friend could do that project?
Well, exactly this. Now, you need to change from business to residential, which means you need permitted development, changing from Class E to Class C. The government allowed that to happen. So, there is permitted development. You don't need to go through lots and lots of regulation. There is some regulation. It can be done. There's thousands and thousands of empty shops on the high street. Let's save the town. Let's save the high street, and let's make it so young people can buy a home affordable. One of my children's a frontline police officer, as you were saying earlier about safer streets. And they talk all the time about it will be wonderful to live in the town, you know. And I think that is a huge part of life. Communities run by the community to benefit the community in their own home, in a disused bank. You know, you could build so many homes into them huge, big stone structures. We don't need to build something out of cardboard in a grass field.
We've had Bank of Dave. Will we have housing developer of Dave?
Listen, whoever gets in, I'm happy to help. Just put forward the views from people up north, because people write to me all the time.
What's the silver bullet then that means that utopia could come into existence? What's the big hold up in the planning system?
I think a huge part of not just planning. I mean, plannings can be changed, and I think people getting together, knowing that their children could live in the area that they come from. That's so important. And it doesn't matter where you are.
But isn't the problem that it's quite often it's the people living in those places holding up developments, opposing them?
Well, let me talk about that just for a second.
They're the ones that stop it.
Because I live in a village just outside Burnley, and we've had something like 100 houses built within 500 yards of where I live. And I think it's wonderful. The local cafe, Sandwiches Cafe, they're so busy because of the new houses that's been built. The pubs are busy again. You know,
but was there opposition
so
that had to be overcome to convince people?
There's always some opposition, but it's about listening to people's concerns. If you're building something that's in character with that area, and you're going to let the local people be able to get their children and grandchildren that could buy a home there, nobody's going to be worried about a friend or a grandchild or a child living locally. That's what you need to. It's about listening to people. Instead of thinking, well, that would be good up north, let's just listen to people all over the country and see if we can work with people.
Matt, help us understand what Michael Gove was on about today, because the kind of the briefing and the headlines around this speech was, councils that hold up development will be stripped of their powers when it comes to planning. and central government will take over. Is that actually what's going to happen in England?
That is part of it, as I understand it as well. But I do think an awful lot of this is about, as you've just heard, it is about listening to the concerns that people have, and some of that is around building on the Greenbelt. Some of that is around saying there are huge numbers of communities that are very concerned about what that would look like. In my patch, it's not a Greenbelt constituency, it's a loss of Grade A farmland, for instance, that people are also very concerned about. But you do have to get that balance right, and I think the potential for central government involvement in the most extreme cases is the right one. But just to endorse that point about town centres, absolutely. We've got so many spaces above shops and also in disused buildings as our town centres have changed. The progress that's been made there with some of those reforms, I think, is really important. There's more work to do, some of it today, but a lot of it, I think, does come down to getting people the opportunity to live where they want to live, which is very often in our towns and cities right in the heart.
So are there developments in your constituency, you know what I'm going to ask, that you're opposing?
No.
No, you're in favour of them all.
I've never. There have been sort of very small sort of this house kind of thing, but in terms of the expanding villages, all of that, I've always been very clear that it's the right thing to do, and I'm lucky that they are relatively affordable compared to Wales.
Well, lots of your Conservative colleagues do. It's a regular feature of MPs' websites and Twitter feeds that I'm opposing this development. Do you sometimes wish, oh guys, you need to say yes?
Yes, I do. I do wish that
quite a lot.
to
them? Do you raise it with them?
Yeah, absolutely.
And how do they react?
And I think there is, I mean, it's not a secret, right? There's a very live debate within the Conservative Party about how do we get those houses built in such a way that people are also able to represent what their constituents tell them day in, day out. But my broad view is, as you've just said, when those houses are built, people understand that it keeps communities alive. And that's really important and broadly welcomed after the fact.
Joe, do you think there is too much pandering to NIMBYs? Not in my backyard, people in the Tory party?
I think there's probably a degree of that goes on, but there are also bigger issues. There's, even when things are built, you can't afford to buy them because of the cost of actually getting a mortgage and where people's salaries are, that they just don't, the two just do not marry up. And so I think there are much bigger issues. There's loads of issues around social care, for example, and the challenges around social care that have still not been figured out, which mean that there's massive under-occupancy because you've got people that occupy huge properties, but they're too scared to sell them because they're worried where the money's going to disappear to. They try and struggle on for years and their family try and support them. But actually, we haven't had a grown-up conversation about that. So half of this stuff for me is actually about it's cross-government approaches that are needed, because it is about planning is one aspect, but it's about the economy and the performance of the economy. It's about where wages sit. It's about whether the local transport network actually does serve that area. It's about whether the local high street is fit for purpose and has the amenities people want, whether the schools are in the right place, the GPs. It's such a big problem.
That's a lot of stuff.
And in reality, we talk about royal commissions to sort out the NHS, but we haven't really talked about royal commissions to actually deal with the fact that housing has been a growing problem, and we still haven't really seen the full sort of range of options. I think, Dave makes some very, very good
Is there a
points.
kind of nuclear option that the Conservatives could be going for that they're just maybe been a bit scared to do thus far?
Well, I mean, it's brave to take on local authorities, because local councillors are those very people that are going to be pounding the streets for you when there's an election next year. So telling them all that they've got to do something they might not feel comfortable with is quite a bold option in itself. But I'm not convinced that is necessarily all of it. And as I say, I think it is a multi-agency, sort of disciplinary approach that we need cross-government, which is actually probably the same for quite a few subjects in this country that we haven't fixed.
John, just very quickly on Labour planning policy, Keir Starmer says he's a YIMBY, yes, in my backyard. He said he'd bulldoze on the Green Belt. You then posted on X quite soon after that, oh, the Green Belt's a great thing and it's part of the fundamental basis of the battle to protect the environment in working class urban constituencies. Is this you and Keir Starmer disagreeing about the Green Belt?
We disagree on that element of it, yeah, I'll be honest. I will represent a working class multicultural community. We have 4,000 new properties going up. They're going on existing sites, brownfield sites. We fight for every little bit of Green Belt because we want somewhere for our children to play and breathe. And the issue for me, and it was a big issue actually last month, a really detailed report, said there's land banking on by our developers. Do you know there are 900 plots that have got planning permission that have not been built upon, but owned by the big builders? They're land banking. So my view is, and actually I think David Cameron came out with it ages ago, use it or lose it. And to be honest, the only time we've ever met our housing targets under Labour or Conservative is when we've had a massive house building programme on a massive scale on exactly that basis. Land developers, if they're land banking, you simply compulsory purchase the land and then you engage the local community on what sort of housing you want, because the things that are going up in my constituency, there's not much family accommodation. You talk to local people, what they want is family accommodation so their family can live near them. It supports social care. The local NHS is then there because local NHS workers can afford to live there.
So what's the flaw in the planning system that means the wrong type of property is being built?
It is allowing land banking by the big developers and not allowing...
That's not really anything to do with what they're actually building, though. You're saying they're building the wrong type of property.
No, they're sitting on sites and not developing them.
Right, okay.
So they wait until the prices go up and they can maximise their profits. 900 lots, 100,000 lots at the moment where they've got planning permission and they're sitting on not developing.
OK, something completely different now. The government has published its guidance to schools in England about how they should approach children in school who are socially transitioning. That's when they might use a different pronoun or name or school uniform that they feel better reflects their gender identity. Kemi Badenoch, Cabinet Minister, was explaining what they're trying to do.
This is not about forcing schools to tell parents. This is about making sure that parents know what is happening with their children. This is a relatively new phenomenon that we are seeing with children questioning their questioning their gender. And we've brought this guidance out because schools themselves have come to us asking what to do. And we think it is very important that parents are brought in at the earlier stage if a child is having questions around their gender and believing that they are of the opposite sex.
So that's the political framing, what's actually in the document. I spoke to our education editor, Bronwyn Jeffries, earlier on and started by asking her, how does this document handle the issue of pronouns?
So this guidance actually is very clear and strong in its guidelines to school around that. It basically says that for primary age school children, the pronouns that should be used should match what their biological sex is, what's recorded on their birth certificate. For older children, it says that a change of pronouns should only be used on very few occasions, that it would be exceptional for a school or college to agree that the pronouns would be different from the biological sex. And in making that decision, that a school or college would have to take into account the needs and interests of the whole school community as well as of the individual child. So it would have to be something very compelling and strong in the circumstances of the individual child, which would lead to that being allowed. And there would be no compulsion for any member of staff or anyone else to address someone by their chosen pronouns rather than by the pronouns associated with their biological sex. In fact, it says that schools and colleges should exhaust all other possibilities.
I was very struck when the government press release landed in my inbox that the headline was about this being parent-centred and putting parents first. How's the government actually done that?
Well, it's done that by making it very clear that schools should always consult parents about a child who is expressing the desire to occupy a different gender identity from their biological sex recorded on their birth certificate. It says that only in exceptionally rare circumstances where there might be a real risk of harm to the child could a school even begin to consider not including parents from the outset in any dialogue around a child's gender identity.
And I know that teachers and school leaders have been waiting for a long time for this guidance. It's been promised and then delayed and then promised and delayed. Are they pleased that it's finally here? How's it gone down?
They're saying they're going to take it away and look at it very carefully. There's 12 weeks for schools and parents and anyone else who wishes to respond. They want to ensure that there's no additional workload for staff. But the reality is that schools have been dealing with these complex and difficult and sensitive situations with some potentially very vulnerable children at the centre of them for some years already, and schools have been asking for urgent clarity. Looking at these guidelines, I think it does give them clarity in some areas. There are other areas where schools are still going to have to decide for themselves, is this one of those rare exceptional circumstances where, for a variety of reasons, and having gone through a series of very careful steps outlined in these guidelines, we would consider making an exception around the use of pronouns or the acceptance of a different gender identity.
Bronwyn, thank you very much. Right, so that's the detail. It then got political very quickly. We got a post on social media from former Prime Minister Liz Truss saying it is not enough. A change in the law is required. So rather than some guidance, she actually wants some legislation. And conveniently, she's proposed a private member's bill along those lines. Matt, is Liz Truss right that actually guidance doesn't go far enough?
Well, I hope it does. And I think the reality on this issue is that we're often dealing with incredibly vulnerable people, incredibly vulnerable children in this case. I think we could do with being as sensitive as we possibly can. And I think the balance that the guidance that the government has produced tries to say, look, there is a presumption in favour of involving the parents, but there is that really important carve-out that says there will be some exceptional circumstances. And I think I don't really see how legislation would make a really huge difference to that, because you're always going to want to strike that balance. And it will be primarily down to schools to try and deal with the individual cases.
OK, and then, John, we had a tweet, sorry, an X, still can't say that, from Kate Osborne, Labour MP, where she said, this guidance is non-statutory. I hope schools put their students' needs ahead of government's hate. Is this hateful behaviour by the government?
I think that they've issued guidance. There'll be consultation now. We've got to take the, I think that the political hype out of this. Schools are going to continue doing what they always do, which will put the child first. They'll ensure that they'll work with those children to make sure they're properly protected. There will be instances, undoubtedly, where the child will not want their parents to know because it will have ramifications. Often there's strong religious objections and things like that. We've seen that with regard to children who have come out as lesbians or gay and all the rest, and they want to be protected. I listened to head teachers this morning on Nicky Campbell's show, and I thought this is exactly what they're doing at the moment. They're being so sensitive about it. The head teachers as well, in some instances, they need more backup in terms of mental health services as well, where people are in distress, that sort of thing. And we need to ensure those resources are there. This is guidance, there's going to be consultation. I think what will happen is, I don't want to legislate, I think it's up to then, let it settle down in terms of practice.
OK, very quickly before we end the programme and we end the Politics Live year, predictions for the next year, 2024. What's something that's definitely going to happen, Joe?
There's going to be an election.
Well, we know that now because last night at the Christmas party, Rishi Sunak said it's going to be in 2024, not January 25.
Well, no one's going to want to campaign over Christmas, so it has to happen next year, surely.
Yeah. Dave, what's going to happen next year?
Whatever happens, we need to go after the energy companies, we need to go after the big banks, we need to go after the petrol suppliers, we need to reverse the uncapping of the banking, we need to use the tools in the toolbox, but we just need decency, honesty and ethics, and people need to listen to people out there.
OK. John, a prediction for next year?
I think there will be a Labour government, and the shock will be when we open the books just how bad it is.
With a majority of what?
I think there'll be a reasonable majority. I think around about 30 or 40, something like that. I don't think it's going to be 170 or anything like that. I think
hope we've recorded that.
I think you're going to see a remarkable revealing of what Labour have really got up their sleeves, and I think that's going to be very good for the Conservative Party fortunes.
And Rishi Sunak will be the leader of the Conservative Party?
Yes.
OK, right. Well, my prediction for 2024 is that Joe Coburn will be back in this seat on the 8th of January. And actually, it's not even a prediction. I know for a fact that's definitely what's going to happen. But thanks to everyone who's been on the programme today, and thanks to you for watching all year. Bye.
I thought it finished on fucking Friday. I was like, oh, I'll just peruse the news a little bit. Oh, what's that? Is that Politics Live? Yes, it is. Oh, better stream that then. Now they're all fucked up. At least I got the end of the year show, right? Was the one yesterday then? You know it's nearly finished because fucking Joe Coburn's fucked off and put this prat in their place. Can I have a rant about housing? I mean, it's the last chance I'm going to get now, isn't it? Fuck housing, okay? Fuck you all. Useless fucking cunt. Stop trying to flog us houses. Build council houses, you fucking muppets. Before Thatcher got into power and declared your castle is your home, fucking nonsense. We built houses with taxpayers' money. Do you know that? I know it sounds very shocking, but they built houses because they're supposed to It's literally a law that says you build houses. Not sell me one. Build them. We pay taxes for a specific reason. So you can build houses. The clue's in the name. Council tax. Why do you pay council tax, ladies and gentlemen? So we can replenish the housing stock. Oh, no. We sold the councils to associations, which are private companies, which fucking sell fucking land to fucking developers who don't build shit, like you just said. It's a fucking scam. The vast majority of people in Germany don't own their own home. They own a council. Well, they don't own a council house. They live in a council house. And what's wrong with a council house, ladies and gentlemen? Because the stigma has always been in poor places. Only the rich people could afford houses back in the day, is the fucking point. So it's always been stigmatized. It's not even like, they don't only say the fucking word council. That's the point. You want everybody to own a fucking home? With what fucking money? If everybody's fucking skint? You twat. And then interest rates go through the fucking roof because we elect fucking Liz Truss. Well, no one elected Liz Truss. We get the fucking point anyway. That twat gets in, blows up the economy, interest rates go through the fucking roof, and everybody's mortgage goes up. If you lived in a council house at the time, your mortgage, because you don't pay one, didn't go up. Fact. Because it's the government that fucking owns the fucking control of the rent. But if you're in the private sector, you're fucked. Because everybody's been convinced since Thatcher, buy a house, buy a house, buy a house. Everyone's fucking everybody over. The fucking people who own your fucking house, who you're renting off, is fucking you over. Why? Because their fucking mortgage has gone up in the house and you're sitting in, and you have to get fucking pay more fucking rent. Plus they want to make money. It's a scam. The problem with the fucking entire housing problem in this country is it's a scam. A fucking scam. You don't build fucking even close to enough council houses. I've been telling fucking everybody this shit for ages. Pay attention. It's a scam. You're convinced to buy a fucking house. For no fucking reason other than you think you're better than somebody else. For some fucking strange reason. When the point is, you need somewhere to fucking live. Would you rather have somewhere to live, or would you rather just be a fucking cockwomble and pay through the fucking nose? Right? You want somewhere to live. I mean, it's even worse down south. Fuck my life. Fuck these fucking wombles who say affordable housing. No. Stop saying that fucking goddamn sentence or fucking little phrase. Affordable housing, you twats. No. That means buy a house. That's exactly what that means. Affordable housing means buy a house. It should just say housing. We need to build houses. You twats, not affordable houses, just fucking houses. Fucking gobshites. Fucking lot of them, Tories and Labour, both of them fucking gobshites when it comes to housing. Because they still think Margaret Thatcher is alive and well in their fucking heads. Let me just explain this to you again, ladies and gentlemen. It was Thatcher that invented the whole buying a house fucking mantra. Before that, they just built fucking houses anyway with your tax. Now they use your tax for fuck knows, God knows what, because they don't even build fucking council houses anymore. Not to the scale that they should be. And where does all the money go? If it's not going to the council, it goes to the fucking banks. Because that money you would normally pay in council tax, rent, it goes straight to a bank who don't even spend it. They give it to the rich people as fucking shareholders. It doesn't go back into the council, motherfucker. It goes to a bank. Banks pay zero fucking tax. Zero, goes nowhere. Doesn't even go to the treasury, of all places. Doesn't even go back to central government. You know why? Because the amount you spend on, let's say, the rent that you would normally pay to the council, right? And you're paying to a fucking bank, mortgage. That doesn't come back. Because the banks don't pay enough tax for that to ever come back. So it's always on a downward spiral. That's why councils are going broke. Because they keep trying to flog houses, and the flogging of the houses doesn't go back to the fucking council. It's a lose-lose situation. Fucking idiots. Fucking complete fucking backwards motherfuckers, honestly. It's like, and that woman said before, Dave said, I've got no qualifications. That made me laugh, and then he paused the video. I was like, what fucking politician's got any qualifications anyway? Thank you very much. I've been saying this as well. Politicians only get their job based on a fucking popularity contest. None of these fuckers are fucking qualified to be a politician. It's so vague. Oh, well, like me, I've got an idea. Are you qualified? I went to school. Yeah, you get the job. You might as well fucking elect Dave at this point. I mean, he seems like a rational fucking guy. Did you listen to what he said? Does that sound rational? I'd elect him. That's how you get elected. If you got a fucking point, like, why are we fucking uncapping bankers' bonuses, and yet the banks are making billions and some of them are going broke? Why are they going broke? Because they're still fucking leveraging shit that they've been doing since 2010. The banks are even bigger now than they were in 2010. Which is creepy. Because all the debt got put into another place. Central banks. That's where all the debt is. Central banks, that's why they've been printing money out of thin air for fucking ages. Quantitative easing, which means they've been leveraging the fucking banks who got us into this fucking mess in the first place with their dodgy ass loans. Doing what, ladies and gentlemen? Selling fucking houses to anybody who couldn't afford one. You see the point here? They've been doing the same shit. The housing market is fucking corrupt as fuck, and these fuckers know it because that's what gave them fucking money. Not even money, really. Not enough money. But the boom, they should have been building fucking council houses because they'd be even richer with all the money that's spent. But they convinced people, oh, buy a fucking house. And then the banks got wise. Like, no one can afford these fucking houses. Let's just give it to them and then write up some dodgy ass fucking loan. And then sell the loans on the stock market as if the AAA graded fucking loans. And we all know that didn't work out well, did we? Eh? When all the banks fucking collapsed. They're doing it again, trust me. Still doing the same fucking shit. Selling the fucking dream. Alright, rant over. Happy fucking Christmas, motherfuckers. And God, I hope these fucking bastards get kicked out in 2024. Fucking hope so. Enjoy your Christmas. See you in the new